Over the holidays, my wife and I were in Oklahoma visiting family. While there, we traveled to a unique place in U.S. aviation history, where we visited, of all places, a train station. Waynoka, a small town northwest of nowhere, Oklahoma, is a place you don't go to unless you mean to, and these days most people don't. But they should, and I did. In this very special episode, I'll explain how a town of roughly 900 people today was once a critical multimodal transportation hub, selected by none other than Charles Lindbergh himself to serve as a key transfer point along America's first transcontinental air rail route. Hello, viewers. I'm Kevin Fisher, an aviation and transportation policy consultant in Washington, D.C., and this is the story of TAT, the Transcontinental Air Transport Company, and its audacious endeavor to carry passengers in first-class comfort from coast to coast in only 48 hours. I call this episode Trains, Planes, and Aerocars. Welcome aboard, everyone. Let's get rolling. Waynoka was founded in Indian Territory in 1887 when the Southern Kansas Railroad, a subsidiary of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway, built across northwestern Oklahoma. By 1907, the town was made a division point, meaning it was the terminal point for two stretches of track where crews were swapped. Before long, it became the largest rail yard in Oklahoma and a major hub. It operated 24 hours a day and employed about 1,000 machinists, boilermakers, sheet metal mechanics, fire builders, carmen, switchmen, engineers, and others. It was a true company town. There was a roundhouse, maintenance and repair shops, a reading room, and a depot, plus an ice plant that produced up to 241 tons of ice per day and served Santa Fe Railway customers shipping fresh fruits and vegetables. To top things off, on July 4th, 1910, restaurateur and hospitality magnate Fred Harvey's company opened one of its famed fine dining establishments, a Harvey House, next to the depot. There, passengers connecting in Waynoka could enjoy impeccable food and service in a clean and inviting atmosphere. Businesses in Waynoka flourished, and life was good. By the 1920s, it was possible to travel from one coast to the other by train in 72 hours. With Harvey houses along the route and Pullman sleeper cars, overnight train travel had become civilized and comfortable. Unlike airplanes of the time, trains didn't stop when the sun went down. They pressed on through the night. Meanwhile, advances in aviation, spurred on by World War I, brought rapid progress. Increased speed, greater load-carrying ability, and more powerful, reliable engines. For the first time, transcontinental commercial air service seemed plausible. But flying passengers at night was still considered too dangerous, especially over the mountains. An all-air trip would require 3 or even 4 days because airplanes had to stop at night. Aviation leaders believed the airplane could not reach its full commercial potential unless the federal government improved and maintained safety standards. At their urging, Congress passed, and on May 20th, 1926, President Calvin Coolidge signed the Air Commerce Act, stating, "Aviation is a problem of lively concern to every nation. Having given the world the practical knowledge of flight, a serious responsibility rests upon us to see that air transport be developed along constructive economic lines." This landmark legislation charged the Secretary of Commerce with fostering air commerce, issuing and enforcing air traffic rules, licensing pilots, certifying aircraft, establishing airways, and operating and maintaining aids to air navigation, effectively laying the foundation for modern air traffic control. At the time of its passage, 19 airlines operated in the United States. Afterwards, that number grew substantially. By 1929, American aviation was thriving, with U.S. airlines flying more than 90,000 miles every day. Still, a traveler couldn't buy a ticket for a transcontinental trip or make it from New York to Los Angeles in less than 72 hours. But that was about to change. Enter TAT, the Transcontinental Air Transport Company. Founded in 1928, its purpose was to provide a fast, safe, and comfortable means of travel across the United States. It catered to those willing to pay more to cross the country in less time than rail or air travel alone could offer. TAC customers purchased a single ticket and experienced first-class travel from New York to Los Angeles via both train and plane. TAT facilitated seamless connections between the two modes in Columbus, Ohio, Waynoka, Oklahoma, and Clovis, New Mexico, at points along an air route chosen specifically by Charles Lindbergh. TAT partnered with the Pennsylvania Railroad for the eastern segment and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway for the western segment. Waynoka, Oklahoma, selected as an intermodal hub, connected TAT's eastern and western divisions and served as the longest rest stop of the trip. There, passengers ate dinner at the Harvey House before boarding their overnight train westward to Clovis. Eastbound passengers arrived in Waynoka by train and continued east by plane after breakfast. The entire journey took just 48 hours and consisted of 2 overnight train rides, 2 flights, and 9 landings for refueling. The most famous aviator in the world, Colonel Charles Lindbergh, served TAT as a consulting aeronautical engineer and chairman of its technical committee. One of his responsibilities was determining the airline's route across the country. He considered geography, existing airports and railroads, and the most efficient locations for air-rail transfer points. After careful study and many survey flights, Lindbergh established an air route that ran southwest from Columbus, Ohio to Waynoka, Oklahoma. The Santa Fe Railroad then carried passengers overnight from Waynoka to Clovis, New Mexico. And when air travel resumed the next morning, they flew almost due west across the mountains to Los Angeles. Eastbound passengers retraced the route in reverse. Lindbergh selected 11 airfields for the service, most of them existing airports. TAT built its own airports and passenger terminals at 3 western stops: Waynoka, Oklahoma, Clovis, New Mexico, and Kingman, Arizona. All told, TAT spent more than $1.5 million on ground facilities, over $28 million in today's dollars. In Waynoka, TAT spared no expense. Waynoka, Oklahoma, an inconspicuous place one had to scour a map to find, became home to the 3rd largest airport hangar and passenger terminal in the United States, behind only Chicago and Los Angeles. TAT spent the equivalent of $6 million to build the Waynoka Airport from the ground up, just a few miles from the Santa Fe Depot. It purchased and developed the property, erected a 202 by 140-foot hangar, and laid 3 runways, 1 north to south, 1 east to west, and 1 northeast to southwest. Believing night flying would eventually become a reality, and wanting to ensure safety in the event of an emergency or extended delay, TAT installed the most brilliantly illuminated landing field in the world at the time. A massive floodlight lit the runways. A beacon rotated atop a tower. Lights were placed every 200 feet around the field and atop every potential hazard. 2 large signs on the hangar roof were illuminated, as was the interior of the hangar itself. County residents said they could read a newspaper at night from a mile away. TAT built additional structures at the airport and rail depot: a generator room, pump house, garage, radio station, weather bureau, and a passenger station and ticket office near the Harvey House. Waynoka held its place on the big air map of the day, a centrally located, multimodal transportation hub and the key transfer point between plane and train. Company officials promised to begin service when everything was ready and not 1 minute before. Delivering on that promise required extraordinary preparation. It meant selecting an airplane for the route, accounting for maintenance and repair, recruiting and training pilots, engineering a state-of-the-art communications system, building the nation's largest private meteorological network, and supplementing the limited federal system of navigational aids. TAT selected the Ford Tri-Motor for its fleet. Safety was paramount, and a multi-engine aircraft was essential. The Tri-Motor could fly on 2 engines and land on 1. It offered reliability, passenger comfort, and impressive load-carrying ability. Lindbergh launched a nationwide search to recruit the best aviators and mechanics. Pilots averaged 3,000 hours flying time before joining TAT. They took refresher courses and were trained and tested on instrument flying in St. Louis. Mechanics stationed across the route tended the engines the way a watchmaker tends a fine timepiece. Motors were inspected at each refueling stop. After a set number of hours, they were completely overhauled. Communication was essential. TAT outfitted its network with teletype transmissions between stations and air-to-ground radio communications between airports and pilots. Weather posed the greatest challenge. The Federal Weather Bureau's reports were too infrequent to give pilots the real-time information they needed. So, TAT built its own network: 10 fully staffed weather bureaus and 82 observation stations along the route. Some lighted airways funded under the Air Commerce Act were complete, but gaps remained along TAT's western division. TAT installed beacons every 15 miles and gas flasher lights every 3 miles. The beacons could be seen from 75 miles away on a clear night at 1,500 feet. Gas flashers were visible for 15 miles. Night flying still wasn't considered safe, but TAT had a contingency plan for every scenario, including backup landing strips along the entire route. TAT was a safety-first, service-first airline. A one-way transcontinental trip on TAT cost as much as a first-class transatlantic cabin on a luxury ocean liner, roughly the price of a first-class international round-trip ticket today. Its customers were titans of business, prominent politicians, and Hollywood stars, accustomed to the very best. Passengers traveled in Pullman or compartment cars. Pullman cars had large, comfortable seats that converted into upper and lower berths at night. Curtains provided privacy. Washrooms were located at the ends of each car. Compartment cars offered private rooms for 2 to 4 people with their own washroom facilities. TAT's aircraft cabins were designed to equal or exceed the elegance of fine railroad cars. Cabins were heated in winter and featured comfortable seats with pillowed headrests and individual reading lights. A courier on every flight provided passenger services: cotton earplugs, chewing gum, maps, and more. Food was served on china plates with silverware and linen. Morning refreshments included hot bouillon and wafers. Afternoon service featured a substantial luncheon prepared by the Fred Harvey Company. Passengers were even treated to the first in-flight movies. Newsreels and Walt Disney cartoons projected onto a screen in the front of the cabin. Ground transportation was provided by Aerocar in Waynoka, Clovis, and Glendale. The Aerocar was a 16-passenger, three-wheeled luxury trailer, often described as a fancy living room on wheels, pulled by a Chrysler Roadster or Studebaker President. Every station on TAT's system kept an Aerocar, just in case passengers needed transport to or from the nearest train station. After landing in Glendale, an Aerocar delivered passengers and luggage 10 miles into Los Angeles. Even 15-minute fuel stops became opportunities to pamper passengers. Covered walkways led into Pueblo-style terminals with lounges, fireplaces, dining facilities, restrooms, and showers. Passengers were especially pampered at Waynoka's Harvey House, where gourmet meals were served in a formal dining room. After dinner, they relaxed in TAT's ticket office next door, which featured a Motorola record player and radio, a fireplace, and wicker furniture. TAT inaugurated its service between New York and Los Angeles in July 1929. The first train left New York's Pennsylvania station on Sunday, July 7th. The first plane took off from Glendale's Grand Central Air Terminal on Monday, July 8th. In New York, famed aviator Amelia Earhart, joined by Mrs. Dorothy Biney Putnam, heir to the Crayola fortune, christened a Ford Trimotor on display in the station's Grand Hall, the City of New York. At exactly 6:05 p.m. Eastern, Charles Lindbergh pushed a button in Los Angeles, activating a huge bell in Pennsylvania Station and signaling the train to begin its overnight journey to Columbus. The next day, passengers on TAT's first eastbound flight were greeted by a grandstand of spectators in Glendale. Actress Mary Pickford christened the aircraft Lindbergh would captain to Winslow, Arizona, the city of Los Angeles. During the first several months, demand was so high that TAT scheduled 2 airplanes in each direction daily. Its passengers included politicians, business leaders, and Hollywood stars such as John Gilbert, Greta Garbo, Wallace Beery, Lon Chaney, and Lionel Barrymore. But the packed planes and parade of celebrities did not last long. TAT's ambitious air rail service faltered quickly after its July 1929 debut. A failure to meet its own high standards, poor timing, and rapid advancements in aviation combined to undermine the company almost immediately. Weather was the most persistent adversary. Despite TAT's investment in meteorology, the western half of the route remained unpredictable. Delays were common, and each delay disrupted the tightly choreographed air rail schedule. Then came the tragedy that shook public confidence. On September 3, 1929, the city of San Francisco, one of TAT's Ford Trimotors, crashed in rugged terrain in New Mexico after becoming lost in poor weather. All 8 people aboard were killed. It was the first fatal crash of a commercial airliner on a scheduled route in the United States. The timing could not have been worse. Barely a month later, the stock market collapsed. The economic shock erased the wealthy customer base TAT depended on. Its 10-seat trimotors often carried only 2 or 3 paying passengers. Meanwhile, aviation technology was advancing rapidly. The industry was inching closer to safe, all-air, coast-to-coast flight. The hybrid air-rail model, ingenious in 1928, felt outdated by 1930. Within 18 months, TAT had lost the equivalent of $57 million in today's dollars and was on the verge of bankruptcy. To survive, it merged with Western Air Express to form Transcontinental and Western Air, later TWA. TAT's air rail experiment became a historical footnote, a bold, expensive, and short-lived attempt to solve a problem that technology was about to render obsolete. But its legacy endured. Its investments in safety, navigation, and the passenger experience set standards the industry carried forward. Waynoka's moment as an intermodal hub was short-lived. Its place as a transfer point between plane and train lasted just over a year. In 1930, TAT abandoned its second rail segment in favor of an overnight stop in Tulsa. The new route included Oklahoma City and Amarillo and ended operations at the Waynoka Airport. The last plane to leave Waynoka on a scheduled route was the city of New York, the aircraft christened by Amelia Earhart. It brought the final connecting passengers from Wichita and departed empty the next morning. For a time, TAT maintained the Waynoka radio station for weather reporting, but those duties were soon transferred. The U.S. Air Force used the airport as an emergency landing and practice field, and the U.S. Weather Bureau assumed operation of TAT's weather station, but both closed in 1939. The hangar was dismantled and moved to Little Rock, where it remains in use today. The land was sold in 1945. Today, the concrete apron stores machinery and hay. The former runways are wheat fields. Only two original TAT buildings remain, an electrical building and a garage, silent reminders of a glorious past. The Harvey House closed in 1937 and became the Santa Fe Railway's reading room. The Railway Ice Company operated into the 1960s when Waynoka's rail yards permanently closed. The Santa Fe Railway eventually merged with Burlington Northern to form BNSF, which donated the Harvey House and Depot to the city of Waynoka. Today, the restored depot and Harvey House are listed on the National Register of Historic Places and house a restaurant, the Waynoka Air Rail Museum, a gift shop, and the Waynoka Historical Society. Dozens of trains still pass by on one of the busiest rail corridors in the western United States. I hope the story of TAT, the Transcontinental Air Transport Company, and the determination, ingenuity, and courage of its founders was as fascinating to you as it was to me. If you've made it this far, thank you. I recently launched this channel to explore aviation policy, its history, and the events that shaped the system we rely on today. My visit to Waynoka inspired this episode, and I hope it encourages you to make your own trip to this remarkable place in U.S. aviation history, or to dig deeper into the national policy issues that continue to foster aviation commerce and uphold its status as the safest mode of transportation in the world. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.